This is Alec.
And this is Jack.
Welcome to another episode of Smith and Scholar. Smith and Scholar is a multimedia project dedicated to promoting and encouraging young men to pursue and live the good life. And we are back, closing out, well, not quite, but we're getting to the end of this year. And now that we've gone into some more fun topics, well, recently, I guess, with reading, not as serious or in-depth as our previous topics, we're going to continue that line with something that involves iron, moving the body rapidly, or sometimes slowly. And I know what you're thinking, Iron Man? No, we're not talking about vigilantism and superheroes.
Maybe another time.
Yeah, maybe another time. But we are talking rather about...
exercise.
Yes, exercise. So, exercise, as you can probably tell, something that we both engage in. Thank you for the demonstration.
You're welcome.
And exercise is great, and hopefully all of you are also engaged in some form of exercise. It helps us, build muscle, build cardio, endurance, you gain strength, and oftentimes it's not always just the physical side, but it can push us in our mental capacities as well.
Yeah, and it's also important, and the reason we're talking about it is because exercise can help us in the pursuit of the good life and in the cultivation of virtue. And, we usually start with a, what is exercise kind of thing. But I think for the most part, the general population understands what exercise is. It's physical exertion, strength training, cardiovascular endurance building, working out, etc. And I guess the cool part about exercise is, there's so many different ways in which you can exercise, right? There's not just one way to exercise. You can lift weights, you can run, you can train for triathlons, marathons, 5Ks, turkey trots. You can participate in team sports, something I've done my whole life. You can swim. I've got buddies who love to swim. People who play individual sports like golf, tennis, the list goes on and on and on. There's mixed martial arts, training, which people love because it's good for cardio and other stuff too, and not just like the practical aspect of being able to hit someone well. And so because there's so many different ways in which you can exercise, I think for us, part of the message today is it doesn't really matter, how you exercise, but what's important is that you do exercise and that you do it often.
Yeah, so now that we've kind of gone through some general exercises, we'll talk a little bit about what we like to do for exercise, why we exercise, tie into the virtues, and then finish out with just some more open-ended questions. So my forms of exercise, which I touched upon when we were talking about leisure, I do weight training, so lifting weights. I like to row, and I don't live near an open body of water, so I don't go on a boat. But
the bayou,
I don't know if I could stand the stench.
I don't know if I've ever actually seen anyone row on the bayou.
I've seen somebody in a kayak in the bayou, so. But no, I don't engage in water sports. But rowing on the machine, and then I also like to go on walks, and that's nice because I can do it with my family. And so that's what I generally do for exercise.
Yeah, a lot of that's similar to me. Not, I guess, somewhat similar. I also like to weight train. I do a 5x5 program. I've played soccer my whole life, and I still do. And soccer is a great way for me to just keep my skill up, and that a sport that I love, but also keep my hand-eye coordination up, my
foot-eye coordination.
Foot-eye coordination.
Because if you're using your hand, I'm sure your teammates will get pretty mad at you.
Yeah, they would get very mad at me. So developing my foot-eye coordination, keeping up my cardio. And I, also play basketball, which is great. I also love to do golf and tennis, which are a little different, but I rarely ever use a golf cart, so I'm carrying my clubs. And when you play 18 holes, that's a good way to get a little exercise in other than just swinging your clubs. And so those are like the things I like to do when I exercise.
All right, so why do we exercise? And honestly, the first thing that came to mind, I was like, vanity. Now, that's not
nice.
That's not the primary reason. It's a secondary thing. So honestly, looking good is something that comes out of exercise. again, it's not the primary reason why I exercise, but it is there. Primarily, it is to feel good, and when I say feel good, I guess there are two aspects to that. In the moment, it does give me this sense of pleasure, kind of this adrenaline rush, and which it feels great because you're recognizing you're pushing yourself to your limits and you're doing something pretty cool.
And I think there's some science, like as far as endorphins being released from working out and stuff, so that has that benefit too.
Yeah, and then kind of like what we talked about in leisure again, when you're doing nothing, you kind of feel this sliminess, but if you do exercise and you get really exhausted after workout, you feel good. Like, it's great. One of my favorite exercise back in high school actually was doing power cleaning, and I would feel the best after doing those because it was a full body workout and you exercise basically every inch of your body, and at the end you just want to lie down on the floor and not move. And so while I don't do power cleans much anymore, or clean and jerks and all those kind of Olympic moves, just being able to exercise and feel some sort of exhaustion at the end is one of the reasons that I like to do it. There's a sense of accomplishment. And then, as I mentioned already, it's a leisurely activity that I like to partake in. And then also, although I haven't done this for now like almost a year, exercising with friends, because I haven't been to a gym this whole time.
Shocking.
Yeah. But exercising with friends, and it's a great way to push each other, push each other's limits. Also, just a really good time to hang out. And generally, not to be all like, oh, high and mighty, but I generally worked out with people who were smaller than me. So the weights that we would do were a little bit different, but I'd see them drastically improving over time. And then that would push me because I say like, what, this guy is like 6 inches shorter than me, 70 pounds lighter, and he's like catching up on me on all these different exercises. So it pushed me to move forward and move faster and get stronger in the process.
That's awesome. I generally am someone who enjoys living a healthy lifestyle. So that's why I enjoy exercise. On one aspect, I like Alec. I want to look good. I want to feel good. Those are important parts of exercise. But I also like the challenge of exercise, and that I think that's more of what I get out of exercise, particularly like weightlifting. And it's both the physical and mental aspects of challenge that I enjoy. So again, for example, with my weight training program, it's a 5x5 program with an A day and a B day, which I do 3 times a week. And it's rotational, and you're supposed to add weight to the exercises you're doing in that weight training program every time. And so I'm adding weight every time I go to the gym. And one, this pushes me physically because I'm strengthening my body. I can tell, when the gyms opened back up during quarantine, and I was able to get back in the gym and pick it up again. I could tell because you start off, you kind of figure out, okay, I think I could start here with weight. And then you slowly build up, and you're like, oh man, I can actually feel my body getting stronger. You can feel your muscles getting stronger. You're physically seeing it as you can see yourself doing more weight. And so you're pushing yourself. You're trying to best yourself every time you go into the gym. Also, there's the mental aspect of it. You have to be mentally locked in and concentrating when you're lifting, especially as you get further and further in the weight. And technique becomes even more important because you could hurt yourself. But also, if you don't, you will fail. You won't be able to lift the weight. I think that there are times when you get into the gym and you just like want to crank out your workout, and then you realize, oh, I need to take like a bit of a rest and reset my technique, and then you complete the exercise when you thought you would fail. And so that's another good way in which you are presented with a challenge and you can push yourself through.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely agree on those fronts, but I think you enumerated it a lot better. So, as we normally do, we are going to tie this into the good life and virtues. And I think you're going to kind of recognize a lot of the themes that we're going to touch upon because, again, you've heard 17, 18 podcasts at this point, so you should kind of guess what's coming up. But we'll go ahead and start with one of the ones that we mentioned. When we talked about this virtue, we talked specifically about the physical aspect, and that's fortitude. And really, it's the idea of pushing through difficulty. And then kind of a sub-virtue of that is order, and that's sticking to a routine. So it's, I don't have the statistic, but I think everybody knows this, that when the new year starts, gym memberships fly through the roof.
Right.
And if you go to your gym, it's going to be packed. And it's like, oh man, like I can't get on my bench or my workout machine that I really want to. And then you wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it goes back to the same old normal customers. So it requires fortitude to not give up after that week or two of your, New Year's resolution, but really sticking through, especially on exercise, which, as you mentioned, is so challenging and demanding of you. And then, on a more comical side, we wanted to talk about not skipping leg day. So that requires a lot of fortitude.
It does. Why is it that people don't like to do legs?
I guess people don't normally look at legs. I mean, if you're looking at the eye gaze, you're probably thinking, most people, I mean, look at me right now. You don't see my legs.
Right.
So if you're sitting at a table.
True.
Yeah.
I just find we can talk about this. That will get when we're going to talk about our favorite exercises. I'll get more into favorite exercises, but I'm with Alec. Don't skip leg day. It's important.
Yes.
And then also, don't skip brain day. Listen to this podcast.
That's right.
But yeah, no, I think fortitude is a huge part of exercise, both in practicing fortitude, and then also just developing it, because you have to have like that initial will to want to do it. And then once you get into it, you get to the point you hit a lot of walls when you exercise, especially if you're someone like, us with our weight training programs who are constantly trying to build upon your strength. At some point you hit a wall and you have to reevaluate, and you can just quit and be like, okay, I'm done. And or whatever. But if you figure it, again, it's all about endurance, right? And that's kind of an interesting part of exercise. You talk about strength endurance or cardio endurance or all that stuff. And that's uniquely tied in the fortitude, as we've discussed in the past. I think another virtue that comes into play is prudence and knowing how far you can physically push yourself and mentally push yourself. That's one aspect of it. Another, I think, is, prudence being all about, thinking about the right thing at the right time, making the right decision. You have to, it ties into like what aspect of your health, maybe you could say like there's an aspect of your health that's lacking, and you need to work on that. And I think that's an interesting way in which prudence is apparent in exercise.
Yeah, so then a subset or a sub-virtue of prudence, I think, is humility. And that's recognizing, again, your strengths and weaknesses. And this can be pretty similar to what we were just saying of like knowing, how far you can go or right thing at the right time. So if you've never done bench press before, don't put the 2 big plates on the bar just to look like you know what you're doing or to look cool. And then kind of another side of humility is also not comparing ourselves to other people.
Yeah, and I think that's super important for especially if you're like a big gym goer, or even just like playing team sports or stuff like that. It's very easy to like get into a routine of like seeing what everybody else is doing and starting to compare yourself. And this is not to say that you shouldn't be motivated by what other people are doing. Like you can go in the gym and I see people who are my height and, my age all the time who are way bigger than me muscle mass wise. And you're like, how did you do that? And you're like trying to figure out a way to push yourself, change your routine, your diet, that sort of stuff. And, I think what you have to remember is, what we're talking about here, exercise is really about self-improvement, both from a physical and mental perspective, but also a perspective of cultivating virtue. And so you need to be setting goals and trying to achieve them. And it's good to stay motivated. But again, focusing on others and what others are doing and comparing yourself to them can be a real big mental block. And then you don't have that mental endurance that you need to be able to push yourself through, difficult workouts. That kind of seems more related to gym, but you can see this in team sports too. If you've got a team and there's a lot of good players, like, soccer, you've got a lot of good soccer players on your team and you're constantly comparing yourself to them, you're more worried about them developing their skill and not you developing yours. And then you're plateauing.
Yeah. And then I think similar to maybe how some women might compare themselves to Instagram models and that kind of, fake perfection or fake beauty. Men can compare themselves to movie stars or athletes that are, again, projected through media to be this example of manliness and strength. and those people put in a lot of time and effort,
Right.
and that's their job oftentimes.
Yes.
So that's why they look that way or are able to perform to a certain degree. And since we're not in that position, if you're a working professional or a student, you have other responsibilities that you need to take care of and take precedence over hitting the gym.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah, so then we're just going to go through all the all the cardinal virtues here and talk about justice. And again, justice is giving giving what is due to somebody. And so in this case, since exercise can be pretty self-motivated, as Jack has mentioned a lot of times, we should be treating our body well because we're not just mental, we're not just soul, but we're body as well. So we need to be able to recognize that to be healthy, it may require some exercise. And then as well, along that path of exercising, not overdoing it and not doing too little, we need to do just what we deserve or what our body deserves.
And maybe even add to it, it goes outside of yourself. Like, for instance, Alec, your father and husband, you have to be physically healthy in order to be like a provider, right? So you have a duty to be, constantly maintaining healthiness and strength, be a protector. And those are all good things. And if you neglect your exercise or your health, that's detrimental to your family, right? So I think, and you owe that to them. So there's another aspect of justice that is interwoven here.
Yeah, and then the last one is temperance, which I kind of talked about injustice of not doing too little, not doing too much. And if you do too much, potentially you could hurt yourself, which would also be unjust. And then if you're doing too little, then on the extreme case, your muscles would atrophy. You'd go into muscular atrophy, cardio weakness, maybe some heart deficiencies and whatnot. So there's that level of kind of temperance and justice. I think tie in really nicely.
Definitely.
So we've kind of hinted upon some topics just while we're talking about this, but I think we're gonna deep dive a little bit into some more specific questions that we thought of. And let's go ahead and get into them. Now, this is not a fitness podcast, as you are well aware by now. And for first-time listeners, you're probably thinking this is a fitness podcast, but it's not. We are not experts in this field or in basically any field that we are talking about in this podcast. So, take what we say with a grain of salt, especially except for the don't skip brain day. That one I think we can say.
Yeah, we can say without a doubt we're experts on not skipping brain day.
That's right, especially as we are career students at this point. All right, so the first question, since we both talked about it as being one of our favorite or one of our ways in which we exercise, what are some of your favorite weight training exercises?
So I have primarily just one favorite, and I do it every time I go to the gym, and that's squatting. So I never skip leg day because leg day is basically every day, every time I go to the gym. And I think squatting is a super healthy exercise. It's very leg focused, but as you add on weight, you're developing. Your balance has to be good. You have to have a strong core, so it develops strong core. You're not getting like ripped in the core, but your core has to stay strong in order to support that weight. Because if it doesn't, that's when you start putting your back into it, and you can hurt yourself. So I think squatting is a really great full body exercise, and I love it. And also being a soccer player, I like to have big legs. And just genetically, I have big legs, and so I've always been someone who's enjoyed getting in the squat rack and cranking out some sets. So that's my favorite, I guess. Something I've also enjoyed doing as of late, which is also leg related, is I love calf pressing. And calf pressing is just fun to me because it's amazing how much you can press with like just your ankle pivoting. And so and it's a fun one to do. Like if I go to the gym and it's crowded and everyone's in a rack, like all the racks are taken, all the benches are taken. It's like, well, I need to do something while I'm standing here. So I either go jump in like an ab core machine, or I jump on the calf press, and you can just sit there and be on your phone and just like push away, and like you're building muscle, and I love that. It's just a little time waster, but it's a good way to build some calf strength.
Yeah, all right. I never really thought of it that way. Just like jump on your phone and crank away. But I guess probably my second favorite exercise is squat. Now, because I've not been in a gym for, like I said, about a year at this point, I have been greatly missing out on doing some heavy weight on the squat. Like I just have dumbbells that I use, and so it's fine. But I've definitely lost some mass in the legs, and yeah, that's unfortunate for me. But once I get back somewhere, then I'll make sure to hit up on the squats. So I'm afraid that I'll be doing like less weight than you if we ever.
It's okay. You'll probably you'll blow by me as soon as like you get back in the gym or there consistently.
So well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But I'll stay humble and say no, Jack. I defer to you.
Okay.
But my favorite exercise, and I mean, this is like every gym bro's favorite exercise, is the bench. I mean, because it's so much fun to, again, put the big plates on and just pump it out. And it's chest, but it also takes the tricep, and it takes a lot of balance, and also doing it right, because you can see people getting on there with like their chest poofed out and their back all arched and whatnot. And I guess there are different techniques to do it.
So, I think that technique a lot of powerlifters use for competition, because it just it changes the distance.
Yeah.
And so they like arch their back, get their feet all puffed up. Yeah, that's all I know about it. So
Yeah,
that's one way to do it.
I mean, and then also just getting a massive chest so that your distance from bench is only a 2-inch difference.
You don't have to move the weight very far.
But yeah, and then also on the bench, you can do wide grip, close grip, regular grip to kind of work out the different areas. And then I'm going to go a little bit further and say decline and incline.
Okay.
To be able to work out upper chest, lower chest, and really get like a full kind of comprehensive chest workout just on one bench.
I've also seen the on a regular flat bench where you put your legs up, like supine.
Cross it.
Yeah, you could just have them up so you don't support. So it's like you have no lower body, back support, core support. It's literally just upper body.
Yeah. So I really like that, and being able to be. You think of just a bench, but there's a little bit more you can do with that. So yeah, and no digs against the people who poof their chest out. I just think it looks really funny. So
it does.
And if you want to be honest, you got to go like full extension down. Like that counts as one rep.
One rep, yeah. So we've talked about favorite exercises. Do you have a least favorite type of exercise?
So my least favorite exercise is not in the realm of weight training, although there are some that I dislike over others. It's actually running. I do not like running. I ran a half marathon about a year ago at this point, and it was the worst experience of my life. Part of it, I didn't train for it. I had qualifying exams, which took up like all my time, and I happened to be sick during it too. So, and I ate like 3 kolaches beforehand. I thought it would provide me the energy I needed, but so running, and I've tried running every now and then. I can run a mile or two, like that's okay, but aside from that, no. And I'll just counter by saying, aside from running, my cardio that I prefer is doing rowing, because it's low impact, and you still get a cardio workout, and you happen to work out many other muscle groups as well.
I'm in the same boat. I despise running, which is so weird because I'm a soccer player, and my whole life I've played positions that require the most running around on the field. But it's funny that that's the case, because people are always like, oh, you have like an engine, you just like don't quit, you're constantly running around. And I think about it, I'm like, yeah, but it's so weird because I don't do any outside cardio training. And I ran a half marathon once, and I actually trained for it. And I felt really good, like in the training, through the training and the months leading up to it. But I wore out my legs. So actually, that was my sophomore year of college. I came back home from school, and my foot was hurting, and I went to the doctor, and I had basically like, it wasn't as bad as a stress fracture. Good Lord. But the doctor took an X-ray and was like, yeah, you're just like, it's weak, whatever. We're going to put you in a boot. So I was in a boot for 2 weeks, because of, the silly, the half marathon that I ran. And I just don't like running. Like this isn't true, right? I'm over-characterizing it, or mischaracterizing it. But like, it feels like there's no goal when you're running. So running a race is different, right? Like if you're in a race with other people, you're trying to get a good time. And I guess you can do that when you're out running by yourself, training for things. But I absolutely hate that. And I mean, it just like, all I can think about when I'm running is like, my knees hurting. And then if you don't have a place to run outside and you're on the treadmill, it's just the loud clomping and my head hurts and I'm trying to distract myself with music and I just don't like it at all.
So maybe let's get off of our negative Nancy.
Sorry for all you runners out there. I just don't like it.
Yeah, I'm actually not sorry. I don't like it, but I'm glad that you can find some enjoyment in it, especially because some of my in-laws like running, and I don't. But one thing I like to think about is practical implications for working out. So as I mentioned, my favorite weight training is the bench press, but one thing I think about is when are you going to be in an opportunity in which you need to like push a heavy weight off your chest? And I guess if there's an aggressor coming at you with with a weapon or some sort, you can push him back, and they push you on the ground, and you're like, "Good thing I've done bench press." Push them off.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some. I think like I guess the importance of particularly weight training is like full body physical weight training. So you're just building full body strength because the stronger you are, the more you're able to deal with all sorts of just situations, like everyday things, like if you're working in your yard, picking things up so you don't strain your back, stuff like that. But there's also, I think you kind of brought it up, like I think it's good for self-defense purposes. Might not be trained in self-defense techniques, but when you're stronger, it's certainly helpful to have more strength when you're in a situation in which you need to be able to help yourself or someone that you love or that you're with. So those are practical. I think I'm a proponent of exercise solely for the practical benefit of just developing full body strength, whether it's physical, mental, cardio, just being a healthier person. I think that's the most practical benefit of exercise, is just being healthy. And we live in a world, and particularly our nation is one. We were just looking this up. Like, what was the average weight for an American male and then an American female?
Yeah, 50th percentile is 197 pounds for a male and 170 pounds for a female.
Which is crazy. I mean, that seems crazy to me. Like, I mean, particularly for women, it seems like a lot.
And for men too. I'm just thinking, like, I'm above average height. And I'm not at 197 pounds. I'm close, but I'm not there. So I just feel like if I'm above average height, then there are 50% people that are heavier than me that may be shorter and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe my perspective is different because I'm just small. Like I'm 5'7", so I think that's 3 inches below the average height for an American male. I think it's 5'10". And then I weigh 145, 150, somewhere in that, between 140 and 150. Depends if I'm keeping up with my exercise regime and keeping my muscle mass up. But I'm I'm smaller than most Americans, so it just feels like, why doesn't everybody look more like me?
Well, if everybody looked like you, then
we'd all be midgets.
We'd have less trucks, or the trucks wouldn't be as lifted.
I have a hard time getting into my truck, I'll be honest.
So I guess we can close out by talking about like different exercise programs that we might want to get into in the future, because we talked about we do some cardio, some sports, and weight training, but anything beyond that?
Yeah, so I think 2 for me, and they're both kind of like getting back into things that I've done or have a tangential interest in. So the first is golf, and this past summer was great because golf was like one of the only things you could do with everything on lockdown because you were outside, you could properly socially distance, and so all the golf courses were open. So I was able to play a lot of golf, and golf is fun, and golf is one of those sports that really challenges you mentally, I think. Like there is a lot of physical balance and ball striking and stuff, but when you're an amateur, you make way more mistakes than you do good things, and so it's just about staying mentally composed, which can be very hard. The second thing that I'm interested in possibly picking up or getting back into is like mixed martial arts stuff. So I did boxing for a year when I was in college, and actually loved it.
I think we can watch your video on YouTube, right?
It might be on YouTube. I don't know. It's not that great. I got my butt kicked.
Yeah, let's just say the guy who was so this is Jack's height. His contender, well, it's off camera. That's how tall.
Yeah, he was way taller than me. It's because I missed the lowest weight class. So they do the weight classes in like groups of 8 pounds. So it was like 140. It was like 140 to 148 or something like that. Or that can't be right. Or it's like 130 something to 142. So 136 to 142 or something like that. And I weighed in at 142 and a half. So I was in the next weight division, which was the 148. And I mean, this guy was 6 inches taller than me, probably weighed like the same amount as me because he was a stick. and I just couldn't get inside. But it was fun. One thing I liked about boxing was that the training, super like cardiovascular endurance. You're pushing yourself. Lots of core training, and then just learning how to like throw a proper punch, I think is like one of the most beneficial things I've ever learned in my life. I've never had to use it, thank goodness, but now I know like technique. I think if you were ever in I mean, this is so practical and weird, and I hope I'm never in a fight with anyone, but if you like go on, like, for what it's worth, get on YouTube and go watch some World Star videos where people like are throwing like their fists in all sorts of directions and they can't hit each other like that. Yeah, exactly. Like that's not. And if you know how to fight, you literally just step back and then you throw a jab in the side of your head and in the side of their head, and you've probably won the fight. So I mean, I think that's what's up. I like boxing because of the physical aspects, but I also like the idea of being able to properly defend yourself.
Yeah, so for me, I have a similar one, and it actually ties into the practical implications for working out or for exercising. And something I'd like to get into in the future, probably farther down the line, is some sort of martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu are usually touted as good self-defense. And it's not as aggressive, but it's getting yourself out of certain situations. And it's, again, on the practical aspect of self-defense and being able to, I guess, repel an aggressor. And I guess one thing that's holding me back is there's a barrier of cost, because if you want to get in a class or have a mentor or something, then it's not always the cheapest option.
Right.
But I guess on the side, I could get into boxing. One of my in-laws got some boxing gloves, so
Okay. There you go.
I could practice spar with him.
Yeah, you should.
And get into that, because he's also a few inches taller than me. So, but I'm definitely outclass his weight group.
Yeah.
But yeah, just having that practical implication of working out, exercising, being able to defend yourself, because as you mentioned, as father and husband, you do have the designation of protector of the family. So a lot of that does take place more in the mental, spiritual aspect, but then physically as well, if the case comes down to it. But I'll just stop there.
Yeah, and I think we throughout this episode we've shown like all the there's a lot of practical benefits to working out and exercise, which I think people realize, but I hope people also see the tie-in to virtue and why it's good to work out and exercise, because it builds endurance and fortitude, and it trains you, and there's an aspect of humility like we're talking about, and prudence and temperance and finding that balance. And I think that's all very important, and I hope people enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Smith and Scholar. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast on all the major platforms, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Twitter to stay up to date with everything we are doing and thinking.
Finally, feel free to give us feedback and ask questions across the different platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Smith and Scholar.